Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and media members. My name is Enrique Davis Maslum. I am the Arizona State Director for Unidos Action Fund. On behalf of Unidos Action Fund, I extend a warm welcome and heartfelt gratitude to each of you for joining us today. Your presence here is a statement to your commitment to our shared vision of a more inclusive, equitable future for all. I also want to thank Luna Culture Lab for lending us their space. Before we begin, it is important to acknowledge the land on which we gather. We acknowledge the 22 native nations that have inhabited in the land for centuries and their sovereignty. Our great city is the Salt River Valley on ancestral territories for indigenous peoples, including Aquimelo Dome, or Pima, and Peeposh, or Maricopa Indian communities, whose care and keeping of these lands allows us to be here today. Today, we stand at a critical juncture in our nation's history. We do not want to return to the days when Latinos, Native Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, immigrants, women, LGBTQ communities lived in fear. Latinos primarily were unfairly targeted and stigmatized for years. They were signaled as people who have lots of problems, drug smugglers, criminals, and rapists. La realidad es que son muy trabajadores. Los latinos son pilar de esta economía, trabajan en las granjas y alimentan a nuestro país. Los latinos trabajan en construcción y tecnología, ayudando a Estados Unidos a convertirse en líder en la industria de semiconductores. Trabajan en atención médica, estuvieron presentes durante el COVID-19, siendo los primeros en responder a las necesidades de emergencia. Son maestros, legisladores, alcaldes, miembros del Consejo, legisladores federales y más. Contribuyen a esta economía. Ellos no le restan, le enriquecen. Latinos are also a constant target in our state. Dangerous legislation is sent to Governor Katie Hobbs' desk. Since taking office, she has vetoed more than 185 bad bills, demonstrating her commitment to protecting our community's interests. With all of this in mind, it is my honor to introduce a champion of civil rights, a champion of Latino rights throughout the country, a woman who has helped organizations become powerful and embodies our belief that we are building power with every vote. Janet Murguia has lived the promise of the American dream and is a lifelong advocate for Latinos. Janet's commitment to prioritizing voter registration, addressing pressing issues in immigration, education, employment, the economy, and healthcare has profoundly impacted our community. These are challenging times, but there is no better time to harness our collective power to lead, unite, and empower ourselves to make a change. Janet, you have our commitment to UnidosUS Action Fund continuing to fight alongside our community for a better future for all. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming Janet Murguia, President of UnidosUS Action Fund, to the stage.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Wow, buenos dias. What a great day and a wonderful time to be here in Phoenix. Thank you, Enrique, for that kind introduction. For me, this is a really special opportunity. I want to be clear that, yes, I'm Janet Murguia, and I'm here in my capacity as president of the UnidosUS Action Fund. That's important. We're an organization dedicated to expanding the influence and political power of the Latino community through civic engagement and issue-based campaign. And I can tell you that nowhere is our work more important than here in Arizona. Latinos represent the second largest group of voters in the state, more than 1 in 5 voters, and by the end of this year, it may be 1 in 4. And Hispanics have already made an enormous impact on the politics of this state, helping to turn it into one of the critical swing states in the country and making the difference in a number of close elections in the last decade, and 2024 will be no different. In addition, we know from our own polling that Arizona Latino voters mirror the national community in their issue priorities. Pocketbook issues such as jobs, the economy, healthcare, and affordable housing, to also relief for the long-term undocumented, to preserving rights such as reproductive rights and health, and the right to vote. That is why we chose Phoenix to make this important announcement. Today, the UnidosUS Action Fund is endorsing President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for a second term. As many have said, our country has a choice to make this November on what kind of America they want to live in and the kind of country we want to see. For no community are the choices starker than for the Latino community. We know what it was like for us to live in Donald Trump's America. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that we do not ever return back to that America. Our community bore the brunt of Trump's harsh and unfair and demeaning immigration rhetoric and draconian and extreme policies that separated families and put a target on the back of every Hispanic in this country, regardless of their status, and led to massive increases in hate, harassment, and yes, violence. And Trump's inept, bizarre, and uncompassionate handling of once-in-a-century pandemic not only led to the needless deaths of millions of Americans, including hundreds of thousands of Latinos and Latinas, but also to the loss of millions of jobs and the highest level of Latino unemployment in our history. The highest level of Latino unemployment in our history. That put our community at risk of losing their homes and livelihoods. We cannot go back. And by re-electing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we won't have to. In the last 4 years, we've seen a tremendous turnaround for our community. It hasn't been easy, but we have seen 4.5 million new jobs were created for Hispanics, and we have the lowest Latino unemployment rate in U.S. history, and the possibility of more high-paying jobs through the passage in a bipartisan way of the infrastructure bill. We've seen a 43% reduction in the Hispanic child poverty rate thanks to the expanded child tax credit that President Biden advanced. We've seen the protection of the Affordable Care Act and even saw it extended in the last 2 weeks to help cover DACA recipients, dreamers who are working hard every day. We've seen the expansion of protected status for immigrants and significantly reducing citizenship fees in a return to a more sane and compassionate immigration policy. And while there are still challenges, there is still progress that we can be proud of. We recognize that many Latinos and Latinas are still hurting from higher prices for everyday essentials, housing, and healthcare. But here's what we also know. The Biden-Harris administration is working hard to help Americans cope, and its policies will continue to make a difference in the second term. I'm talking about President Biden championing historic investments in Latino small businesses and Hispanic serving institutions. I'm talking about President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's policies that have not only cut child poverty, but lowered drug prescription prices and health care costs and tackled the issue of gun violence. Yes, we have seen expanded access to health care for Latinos in this administration and efforts to cut and reduce student loan debts. For us and our Latino students, it's so important for that debt to be removed so that they can have a shot at really beginning on solid footing. For us, the contrast isn't even close. Trump's economic policies favoring the rich and corporations and his historic indifference to the plight of hardworking American families will guarantee to make things far worse if he is elected again. And he has pledged to double down on his cruel and horrific immigration track record and massive deportation plan that will separate millions of families, not just at the border, but in every community across the country. This poses a threat not just to millions of Hispanics, but also will make every American less safe and less free. Our community, our democracy, and our country cannot afford to go backwards. This is an election we cannot afford to lose. We must re-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And we're here because we know the president and vice president cannot fight these battles and continue their road to progress by themselves. They need elected officials who share the same values and will work to find solutions in Congress. That's why we're also very proud to endorse today Congressman Ruben Gallego for the United States Senate. And we're very proud to endorse Arizona State Senators Raquel Teran and Kirsten Engle in their bid to be in the U.S. Congress. Congressman Gallego has an incredible personal story, but he's fought with valor in our nation's military and has been a tireless champion for veterans, Arizona's working families, and the Latino community. He has fought against Sheriff Joe Arpaio and for Dreamers. He is a proponent of greater access to health care, broadband for underserved communities, and protecting the rights of women and communities of color. Raquel Teran has been a tireless leader in bipartisan efforts to fight against cruel and extreme immigration legislation in the state and demagogues like Sheriff Joe Arpaio. She is a friend to working families and a champion for our Latino community. And she has been a forceful advocate for higher wages for Arizonans. You know, her commitment to better schools, equitable health care, and protecting women's access to care is impeccable. Kirsten Engle is a leading champion for educational equity in the state, fighting against budget cuts and fully funding our public schools and universities, including more affordable community colleges, a pathway to higher education for many young Latinos and Latinas. She has also supported more investment in workforce development programs and technical education. These are the leaders President Biden and Arizonans need in Congress. Principled, committed, and willing to work across the aisle to get things done. You know, before I end my remarks, I want you all to see and preview our newest ad, which will launch in Arizona in the next few days. It will accompany investments to help mobilize and continue to educate our voters on the issues, but we'll also be canvassing, door knocking, and engaging our community where they are. Please watch and see.
In challenging times, we need a president who brings us together. UnidosUS Action Fund endorses Joe Biden, a leader with the vision and experience to move our nation forward. Joe Biden understands our struggles and stands for a strong economy, affordable health care, and education for all. He's committed to fighting for all of us. This election, let's choose Joe Biden for president.
Thank you. You know, for Latino voters, a clear choice. With Biden, we can continue forward on a path to progress and a brighter future. With Trump, we move backwards to harmful and extreme policies and an economy that crushed our Latino families. As a community and as a country, we can't afford to go backwards. Para nosotros, en esta elección, tenemos un gran contraste. Con el presidente Biden podemos seguir las políticas que pueden avanzar y han avanzado y beneficiado a nuestra comunidad latina. Con Trump vemos un camino regresando a un periodo muy oscuro y muy dañoso para nuestra comunidad. Nosotros tenemos que hacer todo lo posible para votar y estar presente en esta elección. Muchas vidas están en riesgo. Esto, lo que estábamos viendo, que el presidente Trump no está bromeando. Esto es serio. Y nosotros tenemos que votar y representar los intereses de nuestra comunidad para avanzarnos, pero avanzar nuestra nación. Muchísimas gracias. Ahora les presento a Enrique para que continúe el programa. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Janet, for those words. And before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to make some acknowledgments.